Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be tuning in from. Welcome to episode 158 of Veeam's Industry Insights. My partner in crime, Jason Buffington, has been let out of the cage for good behavior. He's on vacation this week. U.S. holiday later on this week, so a few people are taking a little extra time off, but I am very pleased to be joined by someone that's no stranger to the backup industry. Mike Zolla, who's now at VAST Data. I've known Mike from some of his past gigs, but I'll let him explain that. Mike, for those that may not be familiar with you, tell us a little bit about your career trajectory.
And I can't believe it's taken me this many episodes before I get on one of these with you. Jeez.
We were just warming up for you.
So yeah, Mike Zolla. I've been at VAST Data now a little over a year. In charge of the global technical direction for data protection for the company. Prior to that, I spent 20 years at Dell EMC in the backup space, Savamar Network or Data Domain, Recover Point, any product that they pretty much had. And then I did a year or so over at a private cloud company running infrastructure from the OS down at a company called Syntax. So it's kind of nice to get on the private cloud hosting side and be part of the actual customer and implementer and hands-on kind of group.
Brilliant. And that's why I really thought you'd be a wonderful guest, Mike, because not only do we want to get to VAST Data, and one of the things we like to do is use this stream is we don't really do it as a commercial, but we try to do like a little education. And of course, nothing wrong with describing some of our wares along the way, but I love the fact that you've got a good background, and I thought we could just pitch and catch on a few of these. I should mention that we've got a social team that's monitoring all the chats. We're quadcasting on 4 different systems, and just give a shout out from where you may be tuning in from. If you've got a comment or a question, feel free to throw that in. And thank you very much for Rob for jumping in there. He was first with a comment, says, love the guitar collection. Thank you very much. I'm hoping this long weekend I actually get a chance to touch a few of them. So, Mike, one of the interesting things is in backup, I think the landscape has shifted a bit, meaning the use case for backup and then the amount of data being moved. But I kind of want to hit our first data point, and for those that have tuned into the stream a few different times, you may have seen this one before, but Mike, I like to call this slide the why do we care about backup in 2023, now practically going into 2024. The punchline, I appreciate there's a lot of data points on here, and I'll parse through those, but the punchline is, Mike, that a lot of things go wrong in the data center or even out of the data center, meaning in a cloud environment. And if we look at what this data is telling us, the long bars are our most recent survey, the largest survey in the history of backup, 4,000, a couple hundred different people from around the world, different organizations. The vast majority of them are not Veeam customers. This is truly industry-wide. Those long bars are saying, hey, what are all of the things in a 2-year period that took down my data center? And if you just do a quick add of those, you don't have to be too good at algebra to say, hey, there's multiple things, because it adds up to over 100%. The shorter bars are the last 3 years of, if you had to stack rank, what was the single most impactful cause of outage? So the bit of the money line, and again, you don't even have to read all of this, meaning get into the minutia, even get into the text. You just see that there are a lot of different things over on the left-hand side, different sources, whether that's hardware issues, configuration of a variety of different resources that are taking things down. And then by just kind of go to the next shading just a little bit, what we end up seeing, though, the last few years, what's percolated up to the top has actually been cyber. So in addition to everything else that we've always worried about, which unfortunately those didn't go away, although we can talk about certainly the resiliency of the VAST Data platform here and how you can take that out of the equation. But everything you're used to worrying about, you still have to worry about, meaning what could take down a server. And then you've got cyber internal threats, bad actors externally on top of that. And I'll just pause here and toss it over to you, Mike, just to see your reaction if this seems, orthogonal to what you see or if it resonates.
David, it makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, when you really look at this and we're looking at, accidental deletions and infra network outages, I mean, that's always going to happen in a data center. The struggle that you see is now those deletions or overwrites or recoveries are getting bigger. Not mainly even prior to cyber events, right? It's just data is getting bigger. I'm being able to house more inside of a system. Now, when I couple that with cybersecurity events, one, nobody really likes to talk about them, right? So unless you've really lived through one, it's kind of nerve-wracking to walk through and try to figure things out. But two, the amount of data when you do it or have a cyber event, that's the struggle, right? I mean, it's like everybody in your company's in panic mode, and they all start leaning over the backup admins and those groups going, okay, recover, and what are you going to recover? Like, it's crazy to me thinking about all the stuff that's going on in the company in the background. And most companies have smaller backup teams now, right? Because we've done a really good job from a software perspective, bringing it down to, one or two or five individuals. And now we're going, we had this big event. We have to do this massive recovery or this massive mitigation plan. What is it, right?
Yeah, great point. And, as if the job wasn't hard enough, you probably, to your point, have fewer resources. You've got, more things trying to threaten the environment. And I always like to point out or say that the reality is the service level agreements, but certainly the service level expectations for probably nearly all of your workloads have risen dramatically. So it's pretty hard to hide. But speaking of hiding, I don't know if you caught this yesterday, Mike. One of the crime organizations, the cyber organizations out there, went and reported one of the companies that they hit. They reported to the United States Security Exchange Commission, or the SEC, to say, hey, we attacked somebody. We took them down for a portion of their data, and they didn't report this publicly. So we want you to know about it. So now you've got bad actors, really giving you nowhere to hide.
Yeah, it's funny, Dave, right? I mean, it starts off as, one, it's a problem, obviously, and two, it's always that thing that you don't really want to think about, right? Like, it's always like, yeah, okay, we're going to get to that, but we have these operational things we got to get done and do. And now what we're starting to see over the last 3 years is those things that I want to get to are becoming that higher priority because the impact is so great. The slide shows it extremely well, right? It's that impact of, if this, and it's really not an if, it's a when, right? And then when you're breached or impacted, how much of it is and how long did it take you to figure it out so you can minimize what the struggle is, right? Because there's no true air gap anymore with everything connected on the line, right? So everything's online. So it's like, what do we do?
Yeah, great point. Great point. Toward them, I mean, you're a perfect straight man, because one last, data point I want to share is, not to sort of be very negative, but to be realistic. I like to say, it's good to be an optimist, but it's really important, at least in the data center or when you're dealing with the company's data and applications, to be a realist. So here we took that 4,000, couple hundred respondents and trimmed it down to those that had direct knowledge of their security and ransomware cyber practices, got down to almost 2,000 organizations in 28 countries who said in the last 12 months, here's the distribution of attacks that they had suffered. These attacks, Mike, the thing I like to point out is there's a couple of interesting things. One is I put the red bar around, literally half, at 49%, are saying that they got attacked 2 or 3 times. So literally 1,000 organizations across the globe from a whole variety of different industries. It doesn't matter what your company does, the size of your company, where you do business in. It's a crime of opportunity largely, even though there are targeted attacks. But half the people said they got hit 2 or 3 times. The other thing that my colleague Jason likes to point out whenever we show this is that the number of people that got hit 4, 5, 6, or more times is higher than the number of people, meaning 15%, that did not get hit at all. And then maybe one last thing, and I'll turn it over for your reaction, is I, again, sort of channeling my seemingly glass half empty self, which is not my usual MO, that 15% could be optimistic, meaning what if it's the bad actor's dwell time? What if it's a multinational corporation? We happen to ask someone in the London data center, what's your experience? And maybe they didn't have knowledge of what happened in the Sydney data center. So best case scenario, it's 15% that didn't get hit, but that number could actually be lower, meaning more of us got hit.
Well, it's even worse than that, I think, right? I mean, the ones that have none, you're right. I think that they probably have something, or some percentage of that probably has something dormant, right? You go over to the ones, it's not that different to me to see the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5, the 6, because really you figure out what you think is the problem when you go into these cyber resilience like workrooms, right? And you're in the war room, you're trying to figure out how you were breached and what happened and where it went. And then you think you found the smoking gun, right? You find you like, yes, we found it. We know what it is. Here are the symptoms. And those people go through and they fix the problem. And then that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 starts happening. And it's really because you have that struggle of, oh, maybe that wasn't the thing that started this. It was just one of the things we saw, right? So that's where, I mean, from an AI and a software perspective, that's where I think people need to start focusing moving forward is, okay, I saw this. What are the 9 other things that typically happen when this happens? And I think as a community, we got to get a little better at opening up as to how these things are happening so that we know what else to look for. So that one breach really stays one. It doesn't become 2, 3, 4, 5. Like imagine paying like a ransomware 5 times over. I mean, it just doesn't make a lot of sense, right?
No, it doesn't. You know, I wasn't planning to mention this data point, but we did another bit of research, 1,200 organizations that actually got hit with ransom, because we kind of wanted to get, you know, what are the stories that they could share with us? And again, also not Veeam customers, less than 6% of that 1,200 were Veeam customers. But we asked them a number of specific questions, and a lot of that had to do with, did they pay the ransom? How did they pay? What was their experience if they paid? Long story short, 25% that got hit, which was 1,200, double whammy. They paid the ransom, they didn't get their data back. They got no key. You know, and I always like to point out, even if you weren't in that 25%, which are bad odds, right? You know, 1 out of 4 chance, even after you go and pay, you're on the bad actor's clock, right? I mean, they can choose when they give you the decryption key. Not to dwell on, you know, the specifics of the bad actor technology, but there's very good likelihood that they, for weeks or months, have slowly in parallel been encrypting your systems. And if and when they give you the decryption key, you're more likely in a serial mode, decrypting system by system, trying to do some forensics to see if this looks appropriate, moving on to the next system. So just making the point, 1 out of 4 paid, didn't get the data back. Even if you get the decryption key, doesn't mean it's coming back right away. And with that, I want to be able to jump into our next slide. I also want to give a shout out though, Scott. I wanted to say hello from VAST International, and had a few people also chime in from other locations. The United States, we've got Texas, Colorado, Massachusetts, Florida. There we go. We'll show a little. Oh, actually, we've got a fair amount. Argentina, United Kingdom, France, switching back to the United States, Tennessee, California, just to name but a few. So encourage you to give a shout out wherever you may be tuning in from on any of the 4 platforms we're quadcasting. But Mike, let me get back over to our slide advance. And I want you now to kind of take us through. We've alluded to past recovery, you know, practices are not quite the same, but double click on this for us.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be that standard, hey, let's go ahead and recover a database, an application, a group of servers, right? Because an app went down or something happened, right? That's where you really didn't highlight any issues in your data protection world, right? It was, hey, I'm recovering something. One or two people are upset with me while I'm doing my recovery. I'm going to get you back up as fast as possible, and I'm going to go ahead and get that done. As we move forward, though, and we look into where we are today with cyber and ransomware on the next slide, what we really see is those restore requests are changing, right? And you're going to start seeing in the future here that now instead of recovering a system, a service, a thing, right? We're now recovering hundreds of things, right? We're now feeding or recovering multiple systems that could be VMs, that could be physical, that could be databases, that could be at all different levels that we did in our protection scheme. And now we're doing massive recoveries. And the goal here is, yeah, restore now matters, right? And it can't be a single threaded recovery back to a host. It's got to require parallel recovery performance, not just for a single host, but for the hundreds of hosts that are impacted, right? And bringing things in like Flash and VAST Data's architecture, being able to set a quality of service by adding more compute when I want to do recoveries, or to set a QoS system that I can actually do that for just recoveries in the event that this does happen, becomes really, really nice, right? So now I have that flexibility to recover as fast as possible without making, I guess it's make my client the bottleneck, not make my backup target the bottleneck, right? And that's
Ooh,
where we're
yes.
trying to get to.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Yeah, infrastructure should not get in the way of the business. If the business, needs to pause because they need to do some other activities, that's one thing. But I mean, we're in the service industry really on the data protection side of this and infrastructure and operations. And yeah, to your point, we don't want to be the gate, especially when there's a very good likelihood that there's not just an application or a directory or even a system, but we're talking, as you point out in this graphic here, multiple systems, multiple business processes are down. Very literally could be threatening the commerce of the company, the go forward viability of it overall. So with that, I want to tee up this slide, and I've got some, geeky questions for you because I thought it might be interesting. You described speed, and without sort of getting your lab coat on, I mean, take us through a little bit of the secret sauce of VAST. So we'll tee up at the end a resource that people can double click on, but it's QLC Flash, meaning it's quad level or 4 different layers of different cache. But help us understand, what does that mean from an economics perspective? How do you manage this resource to be able to have the resiliency that you do?
Yeah, so I mean, if you really think about it, Dave, at the top layer, right? A lot of people think Flash, like I can't use that for all my backup. That's way too expensive, right? It's this economics thing. Everybody wants the speed, right? But at what cost? So
Yeah.
then they start tiering and doing a whole bunch of other things. What we've done at Vast, and it's called the Days architecture, and what you're seeing on the right there is the Vast Days cluster. And what we've done is we've decoupled the controller, the IOP layer and the storage layer. And what we've done by doing that is we've given a very intelligent software capability that allows us to land things in storage class memory, so I don't overwrite it and get rid of and end up endurancing those flash drives. And then I logically write them down into that QLC flash, which is cheaper. Now I can keep it for longer term. Vast, because of that algorithm, VAST Data gives you that capability to, so we will support that hardware combination for up to 10 years, right? So it's not like a 3-year, 5-year, 7-year TCO, it's a 10-year TCO. And then at the top layer there, you're seeing those little containers. That's our front end capability for connectivity. So when I need to go and drive more IOPS, I have 100 gig connection capabilities out of those systems. And when I want to drive recovery performance or backup performance, I can simply put more of those nodes together in an extremely dense footprint to go ahead and hit your recovery or backup needs. That makes
So let me
sense,
play
Dave?
a little bit of that
Yeah.
back for you, and tell me when I go astray here. But exactly what you said is sort of the starting point, which is, yeah, if everyone could afford a Ferrari, we would go down that path. Economics, may play a role in that, of course, but you've changed the economics favorably so from a flash or SSD perspective by using QLC, which is lower cost than other types of flash, but you've made up for that. And the two dimensions that people would then worry about, one is endurance or reliability. You use erasure coding on that side of it to make sure that the flash itself is very stable, very reliable, even though you're not using the highest possible cost flash. But on top of that, you've got a landing area there, which is, as you mentioned, storage class memory. Is that NVMe or what is that?
Yeah, it's NVMe memory. So, and really what you're doing is imagine us using storage class memory like DRAM. Only
Okay.
now it's non-volatile. Like it when it lands there, it's immutable, right? I don't have a D
Yes.
stage. I don't have battery backups. I don't have a bunch of. I'm leveraging storage class memory as my DRAM-like componentry, being able to shape my writes, do more data reduction as I bring it down into the QLC drives and make sure that I'm not over enduring those drives or doing write amplification.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And we did get another comment. Someone's actually in the air. Dylan. Dylan Locke is flying back home to Australia. Might as well keep up to date. So thanks for streaming us live. Hope you have a safe travel. If you checked luggage, I never do anymore. But no matter what, hope you arrive well and safe, as does your luggage. That's always a fun thing during this time of year. So, okay, that's the premise of the architecture. The other thing I kind of wanted to double click on, or just put a finer point on, a decade long service life. Because one of the things when you get a very large repository, then you worry about, okay, this is great on day one. It might even be great up to year three, or to your point, a three, four, five. But at some point, right around there, you usually get the big bang. Platform not supported by the vendor. If it is supported, I don't want to use the extortion word, but I'm going to say it's financially disincented to actually try to remain within support. Your contract meaning is so high that very clearly the vendor's trying to push you to a platform, and now you've got this huge event of literally trying to take, possibly years worth of backups and move them to another platform. But you're saying the way you've decoupled this, meaning disaggregated the architecture, you can have a service life that's measured actually in double-digit years.
Yeah, and you can mix and match generations too. The
Okay.
way in which we've done this, right? Typically, you dumb down the newest generation to the oldest when you put things in a cluster, so
Yep.
one's not overperformant. That's not the case with VAST, right? Now I can actually take a system that's a Gen 3, Gen 4 system, put it with a Gen 1 system, and really I'm worried about that front end connectivity layer. I can do my quality of service there. The back end's still all flash. It could be 30 terabyte drives today, 60 terabyte drives tomorrow. Doesn't matter. It's flash, right? So the reading of those and the way in which we stripe across the back end eliminates that concern of mixing and matching hardware, and we support them 100% all together, the different generations.
Brilliant, brilliant. Another case of where infrastructure should not get in the way of business operations. In this case, the operations of the backup practice, it's trying to keep everything up and operational. So I nerded out a little bit with you on that, probably took you off your normal talk track. Let me do the next click and take us through this.
Well, so if you think about it, right, with V12, right, with Veeam 12, we've been able to now write to S3, and now we're that performant S3 target. And what you're seeing here is just the standard backup environment, right? I have some VMs, I backed them up through proxies, they landed on the cluster, and you can see how much space I'm actually consuming. I have 913 terabytes available to me. If you look on the left-hand side, right, I've backed up 12 terabytes of VMs. And really the question becomes, in a cyber event, what happens when I need to recover my data? I can't simply recover back over my prod. As much as we would love to, our forensics teams, our CISO, our security teams are trying to figure out what happened. But I also want to start bringing my business back up, right? And the question then becomes is like, where do I do that? Do I have space to do that? Most people have their storage arrays running at 80% full for production. Where are you going to recover your data? You're going to wait? before you start bringing back mission critical applications. And really what you're seeing here is, oh my gosh, what do I do? And we have the capability to make a decision. And I can use this in two different ways. If we advance the slide once, what we can do is I can choose now to recover from that original S3 bucket to an NFS data store that sits on VAST. I could use that with Veeam's Data Labs if I'm testing and scanning and figuring things out. Or two, in the event of a cyber issue, I could actually run those virtual machines on an NFS data store that's supported by VMware with NConnect and drive that 33 gigs a second through a single 33 terabytes an hour through a single vVol, right, on my virtual cluster, and look at the capacity. It went from 913 terabyte 0.9 terabytes available to 913.7. So we lost about, I don't know, 200 gigs to restore terabytes of data. And now I can run in production while we're still doing forensics on our primary systems. But now I can start bringing up my applications and eventually vMotion them back, storage vMotion them back when we're ready. But now my business is up and running as fast as possible.
I love that. I mean, there's so much to unpack there, but I think, just if you're a backup person, if you're responsible for keeping things available and operational, just thinking about some of the real world ransomware attacks. A few years back in the United States, there was an oil pipeline that got taken out. I did not know this. You may well know this, Mike. I don't know if a lot of our viewers know this. I recently learned that the cyber criminals didn't take down the flow of oil. What happened was they took down the billing system. So the company made the decision to stop the flow of oil in the wintertime because they could not monetize it. There was no financial ability to track what went where to whom, etc. So there, and I'm not trying to blame that business. I'm just making the first of two examples of attack was launched in one way that had sort of derivative consequences, negative side effects, if you will. Now, directly to what you've just described, few Las Vegas incidents that we heard about in the casinos kind of recently over the US summer timeframe. Some go back in time, some are more recent. Because the casinos did not know the extent of the damage, which is the nature of cyber, right? Tornado, if it's coming, if it's hitting you now, if it's past, right? You get a clues as to what stage you're in and what has been affected. My colleague Jason likes to say, well, yeah, if the server's smoking, we suffered fire. If the server's still wet, I know that one's, been under flood, and I know the dry ones are okay. We don't know in a cyber event where we are in the cycle, what systems may have been affected. So several of the casinos proactively shut down a lot of different operations, including such mundane sounding things as you and I, if we were there, our hotel keys would no longer work. They shut down those systems because it was unknown if they were affected or not. Then, in terms of trying to bring them back online, to your point, they didn't have infrastructure they could trust. And even as much money or resources as a major Las Vegas casino may have, doesn't mean that they can drop ship racks upon racks of servers and extra storage and networking, et cetera, just at the drop of a hat. So they had no environment to stand up. What you've just described is essentially more of a resume than a recover, and you don't necessarily have to have different infrastructure. And Veeam's had that capability for some time, but the kicker is in the title, no penalty, right? You're not going to see measurable drop off in operations. So you can get back up and going, but you're not going to have to do it in sort of limp along mode. You're actually really business viable.
Well, and that's the thing, Dave, right? I mean, when you look at this, a lot of people can give this kind of capability, but they do it at that performance penalty, right? So it starts off as hey, yeah, bring up a couple VMs and you're great. But then you start bringing up hundreds of systems because you do have a cyber event, and now applications are missing their SLAs, their response times back to the other applications that they're trying to feed. It just doesn't work, right? This no penalty capability is our system probably goes ahead and recovers and stores and feeds up that data, serves it up faster than your production array does anyway, in most cases. So now you're using that as a last line of defense. It's just crazy how you can see that kind of wrapped together.
100%, 100%. And I want to give a shout out, if people want to learn more about this joint solution, we've got a very simple URL that we're going to drop into chat here, but it's just a simple 2-page brief. It's pretty dense, meaning it's got a lot of great information for only 2 pages, but encourage you to check this out. It recaps a lot of what we've talked about, has a couple extra diagrams in there. But Mike, this is outstanding. Thank you so much for joining us live. Want to give a shout out to some upcoming activities. Because it's a United States holiday this Thursday, a couple days from now, we won't have a Tech Bites from Rick Vanover, easy for me to say, this Thursday, but he'll be back next week live from Las Vegas that we just referenced. AWS reInvent takes place next week. He'll be doing something live from venue. I'm scheming up something a little bit interesting for Tuesday, so stay tuned on your socials for that. Again, want to give a huge shout out to Mike Zolla from VAST for coming and chatting with us on this. Really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Stay safe, stay positive, and we'll see you on the next live stream.